Order, order. We come to questions. Secretary of State for Education, Ian Byrne.
Mr. Speaker.
Our government is driving an agenda to break down barriers to opportunity and reduce child poverty. Around £1.5 billion is spent annually on free lunches for over 3 million pupils. This includes all children in reception through to Year 2, and we have committed to introducing free breakfast clubs in state-funded primary schools. As with all programmes, we will keep our approach under continued review.
Byrne.
Knowsley, an area of my constituency, is the highest proportion of obese and overweight children in England according to NHS data. Knowsley's Council Director of Public Health recently described to me how this was an issue of poverty and deprivation. And we know from research into universal free school meals in London that this policy can reduce obesity rates by up to 10%. Earlier this month, I got unanimous support from the Council when I suggested Knowsley could be a perfect test bed for the rollout of universal free school meals. So will the Minister meet with me and a leader of Knowsley Council to discuss this possibility?
Minister.
Over 13,000 pupils are supported with a healthy and nutritious free meal at lunchtime through the Department's free school meals and universal infant free school meal programmes in Knowsley. Unlike the party opposite, who are on the side, we are on the side of parents in making a child-centred government a reality. I know my honourable friend is a real champion on these matters, and I'm very happy to meet with him to discuss this further.
Hinds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Because we've widened eligibility, 1 in 3 children could get a free school meal in 2024 as against 1 in 6 back in 2010. That was despite the fact there were 600,000 fewer children growing up in workers' households and the proportion of people in work and low pay had halved. Will he now commit that this government will maintain those levels of eligibility?
Minister.
I thank the Right Honourable Member for his question, and the Department recognises the valuable role that free school meals make to encourage all parents eligible for the entitlement offer. We will continue to review our approaches and take a consistent approach going forward.
Munira Wilson, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Both in government and in opposition, Liberal Democrats have a proud record of championing free school meals for all those who need them. But even amongst children from some of the poorest families who are eligible today, too many are missing out. Mr. Speaker, Lib Dem-led Durham County Council has automatically enrolled children for free school meals this academic year, resulting in over 2,500 additional children getting a meal at lunchtime and an extra £3 million in pupil premium funding for the county. So will ministers finally commit to automatically enrolling all eligible children in England? The Children's Wellbeing Bill is the perfect opportunity to do so.
I thank the opposition spokesperson for her question, and as I mentioned, with all government programmes we will keep our approach, including eligibility for free school meals, under continued review. We are aware of local measures being trialled around auto-enrolment and are supportive of the overall aims of these schemes.
Sarah Owen.
Number 2, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government does not set or recommend pay in further education. However, in the midst of tough decisions taken at the budget to fix the foundations after being left a £22 billion black hole by the Conservatives, we prioritised an additional £300 million for further education.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to declare an interest that my husband works at the Luton Sixth Form, although this question does not affect him. I'm proud to have Luton Sixth Form and Barnfield College in my constituency, places where young people not only develop their education but also their ambitions. Excellent sixth forms only stay that way by attracting and retaining the best staff. But with the funding shortfall left by the last Tory government, I'm concerned it's our younger generations who will feel the loss. Will the Minister outline how sixth form colleges can use their funds to deliver the deserved 5.5% pay rise for teaching staff in colleges?
Minister.
I recognise the vital role that sixth form colleges play, and indeed Luton Sixth Form College as well. And I agree, high quality staff are what helps to make them great, as well as our amazing students. That is why we announced an additional £300 million for further education in the budget, and why we are releasing £50 million of that in this academic year, so that colleges can respond to priorities including workforce, recruitment and retention, and to use these funds as they see fit.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bal Paris school in my constituency has a sixth form, and they've calculated that if their increased funding for sixth forms had kept pace with just 2% over the last 15 years, they'd have more than £650,000 extra to keep their school running. The head warns me that the sector is now at breaking point, and I wonder if ministers recognise what is going on in the sector after the years of underfunding that we've had.
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his question, and I'd just like to reiterate that the one-off £50 million grant will enable colleges to respond to current priorities and challenges as they see fit, including workforce recruitment and retention, and it is up to the colleges how best in sixth forms they choose to use this funding to best meet learners' needs. And I welcome the honourable member to write in if he would like some further information on this.
Minister Neil O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's a very, very important question from the Honourable Lady for Luton North. The government funded the pay award for schools and academised sixth form colleges, but unlike last year, not for standalone sixth form colleges, and that decision has led to 7 days of industrial action already. And after threats of judicial review, the DfE offered some additional funding, but only 7 of the 19 million that's needed. And that funding gap's led to a pay gap, and as a result, the NEU have more strikes planned, and the NAS-UWT are now also balloting. So what is the government's plan to end the dispute and end the damage that's being done to these students?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for his question, but he will know that industrial relations are a matter for sixth form colleges themselves, in coordination with the sector-led national bargaining arrangement through the National Joint Council. We encourage open and constructive dialogue by all parties in the best interests of staff and students during this critical transition period.
Paul Davis.
Number 3, Mr Speaker.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Getting more children reading for pleasure is a key part of our plan for change, and our work to drive high and rising standards across education by giving all of our children the best start in life. Earlier this month, I was pleased to join the Prime Minister as he unveiled a landmark partnership between schools here in the UK and in Ukraine, based on the power of reading and backed by legendary children's authors, including Michael Morpurgo.
Paul Davis.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. According to the Libraries for Primaries campaign, 1 in 7 state primary schools in the UK lacks a dedicated library or reading space, and this rises to 1 in 4 in the most disadvantaged communities. As we know, reading for pleasure is essential for a child's academic success and mental well-being. Thousands of primary schools still need libraries. Does the Minister agree that libraries are vital for child development? And what further steps can the government take to ensure every primary school has a library?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He is absolutely right about the power of reading. We all know that reading broadens horizons, nurtures creativity, and I want more children to experience that joy, although sadly we know that more and more children in our country are not enjoying reading for pleasure. We know also, Mr Speaker, that under the Tories, 1 in 4 children were leaving primary school without meeting the expected standard in reading. Little wonder they aren't able to enjoy reading in the way that they should. Through our plan for change, we will drive high and rising standards to make that a reality.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Does the Secretary of State accept that the use of phonics as the basis of teaching reading has been thoroughly vindicated?
Mr Speaker, I do accept the absolutely essential role of phonics. It was a Labour government in 2006 that first started the rollout of phonics. We need all of our children to reach a brilliant standard in reading, but as I just said, 1 in 4 currently don't meet the required standard. There is so much more that we need to do to ensure that all of our children get a firm foundation in those subjects and, yes, enjoy reading as well.
Sir Secretary of State, Laura Trott.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. We know that smartphones in the classroom have a negative impact on reading and educational attainment of children in general. When in government, we issued guidance to try to ban smartphones in the classrooms, but the latest evidence is clear that they are still far too prevalent in schools. So to fix the problem, guidance needs to be put on a statutory footing. Does the Education Secretary agree that children's education outcomes are negatively affected by smartphones? And if she does, will she back our amendment to ban them from the classroom for good?
Sir
Mr Speaker, I agree that phones have no place in the classroom. It is entirely right that schools take firm action to stop their use, and I know that that is what the vast majority of schools already do. As the Right Honourable Lady just said, last July they said that they didn't need to legislate in this area. Nothing has changed in this time. I back the approach that they took in July in this area. Yet again, another headline-grabbing gimmick, no plans to drive up standards in our schools.
Christine Geordie.
Thank you very much. Mr Speaker, number 4, please.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Labour Government is at the forefront of change, and as I said to the BET conference last week, we are determined to ensure that AI will be a positive, radical, modernising force for good in the lives of working people. The Department for Education is a member of the AI working group, collaborating across government to share thinking and expertise as we develop future policy.
Christine Geordie.
Thank you very much. Many of my constituents and local academics have expressed concern about the cancellation of what would have been the UK's only exascale computer at Edinburgh University by this government last year. It wasn't mentioned at all in the AI Opportunities Action Plan. It would have been a major beneficial development in this sector. So can the Secretary of State tell us what discussions she is having with other Cabinet Secretaries and with colleagues to ensure that this takes place, and can she reassure the public that the benefits of AI will be spread to universities across the UK?
Secretary of State.
I appreciate the Honourable Lady's interest in this area. She will know that the proposed exascale supercomputer project is one such programme that the Government is considering. We are currently assessing the best way to take this forward. The previous programme was announced under the last government, for which full funding was not allocated. We are committed to developing a strategy setting out a 10-year plan for our country's needs. That plan will be published in the coming months alongside the spending review, but I will make sure that officials in DSIT pick up the Honourable Lady's concern and that she receives a full response.
Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question number 5, please.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As autonomous institutions, universities are responsible for their staffing decisions, including recruitment and retention. What I can say is that where the Tories left universities on the brink, we have acted decisively to secure the future of higher education sector. We remain committed to restoring universities as engines of growth, opportunity and aspiration.
Dr. Peter Prinsley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The number of clinical academics is in worrying decline. These are the people who teach our doctors in universities and are conducting groundbreaking research. Consultant clinical academics' contracts with universities give them pay parity with the NHS. However, the universities don't have the funding to match the costs of the new NHS pay structure for consultants. So, unable to retain them, I've heard that 20 out of 26 medical schools in the country are offering voluntary redundancy to their staff, and sometimes not voluntary. Does she agree with me that we must do all we can to support medical education and research in this country?
I am aware of my honourable friend who has extensive knowledge in this area, and I seek to reassure him that the government recognises the vital role that clinical academics play in research and education in the NHS. And while universities are independent and therefore responsible for decisions around pay, we are committed to working closely with partners in education to ensure clinical academia remains an attractive career choice for all, including students from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Tim Farron.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The new Pears Medical School at the University of Cumbria and the Lancaster University Medical School, amongst others, are struggling to recruit and retain staff, academics, clinical academics, in no small part due to the somewhat masochistic decision of the last government to undermine one of Britain's best exports, namely the income we receive from overseas students. I wonder if the Minister would undo this nonsense and allow Britain's brilliant universities, and especially the medical schools, to help boost the quest for economic growth.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, students are incredibly important to our universities, and we have some of the world-leading universities. In response to his question, I will ask my honourable noble friend from the other place to respond.
Question 6, please, sir.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Labour's plan for change will get a record share of children ready for school, hitting key developmental targets by the age of 5. Family hubs will play a crucial part. We're investing £69 million in family hubs, targeting support where the money will make the biggest difference to children's life chances.
Right, Charles.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In Dill, the Blossoms Children's Centre has been closed, and the new merged service does not offer the level of service required for 1 to 4-year-olds and is not fit for purpose. What can be done to reopen this much-loved and sorely missed community asset?
Minister.
Local authorities must engage with families to co-design services and ensure services meet their needs. We're investing £126 million in Family Hearts and Start for Life and through our plan for change. This government aims to get a record proportion of children hitting key developmental targets by the age of 5. I would like to acknowledge my honourable friend, and if he would write to me further on any particular issues, I would be happy to take that up. I would also like to say department officials are aware of the case and are working with Kent County Council to continue to deliver services.
I didn't realise Strangford was in Kent. Jim Shannon.
Mr Speaker, the issue is in Kent and in Strangford. The Minister's right to respond about the importance of disability hubs and family hubs in Kent. In Northern Ireland, we have a commitment to the very same process. Has the Minister had an opportunity to discuss the ways forward here with those in Northern Ireland so we can share the experiences and the best way? Thank you.
If the Minister wishes to answer the question, because it's definitely not linked.
I would like to assure the honourable member that the Secretary of State has had such conversations and will continue to do so.
Edward Murdoch.
Number 7, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And with permission, I will answer questions 7, 8, 10, 12 and 17 together. Because, Mr Speaker, I know this topic is of interest to many colleagues across the House. The last Conservative Education Secretary labelled the SEND system she left behind as lose, lose, lose. Their own shadow minister said they should hang their heads in shame over their record, and just last week the schools minister of 10 years said they let down thousands of children. We agree wholeheartedly this is a system we inherited, but there is light at the end of the tunnel as this Labour government works hard to reform and improve the system.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. At Dorset Studio School in my constituency, 52% of its students have special educational needs, well above the national average, and 11% are in receipt of ECHPs. A funding agreement between the Treasury and the Department of Education in February 2023 to upgrade the school's facilities, including a new school hall, a canteen, specialist teaching facilities, in order to bring the school up to purpose, and yet there's been no progress since May 2024. Will the Minister please outline what steps the Department will take to get the ball rolling on this? And if she doesn't know, please can she meet with me so that we can get things started as soon as possible?
Minister.
I appreciate the honourable gentleman's question and concern about making advancements, indeed improving our capital provision for children with special educational needs and disabilities is a priority for this government, which is why we have allocated £740 million of additional investment to create those additional places in both mainstream and special schools. But I'm more than happy to look at the particular case that he raises, as indeed it may be for my honourable friend, the Minister for Early Education, to look at also.
Colleague Glover.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. In Oxfordshire, the high needs block accumulated deficit is expected to rise to £77.1 million by the end of 2025, and across England is expected to rise to nearly £6 billion in the same period. Does the Minister agree with me that in the long term, a shift towards inclusive education, early intervention and enhanced support in mainstream schools is essential to create a sustainable and effective system that meets the needs of all children and young people, and will she commit to delivering it?
The honourable gentleman asks an important question, and we absolutely need to see a more inclusive mainstream system, an education, health and care plan process that gets children with special educational needs and disabilities the support that they need, and indeed in doing so by improving the mainstream inclusivity of our schools. As I outlined, we have allocated capital funding to that, but indeed we are looking at reforms on a whole range of levels to ensure that children can be educated in their local community as far as is possible.
Lewis Cocking.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I draw members' attention to my register of interest. Since I was elected, I've heard countless times from parents across Broxbourne that the special educational needs system is too difficult to navigate and all too often just doesn't work. So what action is the Minister taking to improve confidence of parents within the SEND system?
Minister.
I recognise the story that the Honourable Gentleman tells. Indeed, it is told by many families right up and down the country. And indeed, as I said, the Honourable Gentleman should recognise that this is a legacy that the last Conservative government left for many families, many children, letting families down. We are working incredibly hard to reform our system, from a curriculum and assessment review, from capital investment, from working with local authorities to improve the education, health and care plan process and the timeliness of assessments, and we will continue to do so to clean up the mess.
Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I recognise absolutely what my honourable friend has said, that she has inherited an appalling situation from the last government. The recent Public Accounts Committee bore this out. But is she able to give a little bit more information about how she's going to reduce the number of families that aren't getting timely assessments, and how she's also going to address the issue of doubling demands for assessments?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady is absolutely right to refer to the Public Accounts Committee and its very worrying findings on the situation that we have. As she rightly identifies, it's our ambition that all children receive the right support to succeed where possible within mainstream schools. That will need education, health and care plans to be processed more effectively, but also for schools in and of themselves to be supported to become mainstream and inclusive, so that children and their families are not left waiting. And indeed that will help reduce the cost of transport, when far too many children are being transported to other local authorities at great distance and time because they cannot be educated locally. All of this will go towards not only driving down the challenges for families, but also getting much better outcomes for the money that is being spent.
David Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At a recent surgery, a constituent told me that she'd been fighting Tory-led Hertfordshire County Council to carry out an EHCP assessment for her son for well over a year. Once it concluded, she was forced to go to tribunal 6 times in the last 2 years. She informed me that she met resistance from both the school and the council throughout. After years of neglect by not only the previous Conservative government, but Conservative councils locally as well, I welcome the steps the government has taken to reform the SEND system. What assurances can the Minister give to my constituents and others in Hemel that EHCP assessments will be a priority?
Minister.
I'm very sorry to hear what the Honourable Gentleman says about his constituent, and we absolutely need to see education, health and care plan assessments progressed more promptly and ensure that they are issued as quickly as possible so that children can begin to benefit from the support. The department is working closely with local authorities who have issues with timeliness. There is, without doubt, a lot more to do, but we are determined to improve this situation for children and their families.
Chair of the Select Committee, Helen Hayes.
Mr. Speaker, there are children with special educational needs and disabilities in every school across the country. Often they face unacceptable barriers to participation, including school buildings which are not inclusive or fully accessible. Can the Minister say, as part of the Government's welcome commitment to inclusive mainstream schools, what she's doing to ensure that all expenditure by the Department for Education on new school buildings and building refurbishments helps to make schools more inclusive?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady raises a very important point that indeed We want to ensure that every teacher is a SEND teacher and every school is an inclusive school. And obviously we're making progress by investing £1 billion into SEND, investing £740 million into creating those more inclusive specialist places in mainstream schools, and indeed to undertake the sort of adaptations that may be required within mainstream schools to make them more accessible. But she raises an important point and I thank her for it.
Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 9.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill is the single biggest piece of child protection legislation in a generation. It will stop more children falling through the cracks through landmark reforms. No more empty words, but real action to keep children safe. That's why it's a shame that the Conservative opposition have played silly games on this subject.
Okay, Kirst.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Leader of the Opposition dismissed safeguarding measures in the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill as a distraction after the tragic cases of...
Order. Mr. Timothy, please. You're getting a bit loud recently. Yeah, you don't want that early cup of tea today. Come on, Luke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After the tragic cases of Star Hobson, Arthur Labinjo Hughes and Sarah Sharif, can the Secretary of State remind members opposite why these measures are so vital if we are to protect children?
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. Mr. Speaker, members opposite might not like it, but that is what the Leader of the Opposition said. The Conservatives had 14 years to stop vulnerable children falling through the cracks. Now is the time for action. No more empty words, no more lessons learned. Labour brought forward the single biggest piece of child protection legislation in a generation, and they refuse to back it. To label these measures a distraction is a new low, and I would encourage the Shadow Secretary of State to distance herself from those shocking remarks.
Gregory Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do think that the Secretary of State should really consider what she's
Quite right.
Quite right. But, Mr. Speaker, in the Children's Wellbeing in Schools Bill, there are specific clauses around homeschooling. Now, I know the Labour government doesn't like any form of education that isn't state-run local authority schools. But there are significant concerns from those who homeschool that this bill will put unfair burdens on them and will change the relationship between them who are lawfully and legally educating their children at home and the state. Will she meet with representatives from homeschooling to discuss their concerns and to make sure that the bill that she brings forward has the relevant safeguarding, but also ensures that those who homeschool are made to feel that they are contributing to their children's welfare?
Mr. Speaker, parents who choose to home educate their children are absolutely within their rights to do so, and those who provide a safe, loving, good standard of education have nothing to be concerned about in this legislation. What we are concerned about, Mr. Speaker, is the growing numbers of children where we simply do not have visibility as to where they are, and these measures will make sure that where there are serious concerns about child protection and safeguarding, for example, where a Section 47 investigation is underway, that the local authority must consent to home education in those circumstances. I'm frankly staggered that the honourable gentleman finds these straightforward measures to keep children safe such an outrage. This is about protecting children.
Chris Coughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 11.
Despite having to make tough decisions at the budget to fix the foundations, key education priorities were protected. That's how we're able to provide £1 billion high needs budget to help local authorities and schools support young people with SEND. Ultimately, as I said, we inherited a lose-lose-lose system, but we are determined to reform the system and restore parents' trust. The Secretary of State and I meet regularly with ministers from other departments on special educational needs policies to ensure we take a whole government approach.
Chris Coughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every head teacher in Dorking told me that early intervention is vital for our special needs children. London Business School told me that hiring people with special educational needs can be a source of competitive advantage for companies. So does the Minister agree with me that these principles could be the basis of a more financially sustainable and compassionate special educational needs system that might avoid tragedies such as those of my constituent Jennifer Chalkley, who tragically lost her life aged 17 due to inadequate SEND provision?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his very thoughtful question, and we do absolutely recognise the role of the early years in identifying needs and providing that timely support. We launched the new SEND assessment resources and child development training, and are identifying and supporting communication needs through the Early Language and Support for Every Child programme with NHS England, and indeed we will continue to work across government to ensure that children with SEND do get the right support at the right time. And indeed, I'm very sorry to hear about the tragic circumstances that the Honourable Gentleman outlined.
Snell.
Of interest. One of the biggest pressures on SEND funding in Stoke-on-Trent is the independent alternative providers who charge tens of thousands of pounds for singular places, often with huge profit margins for themselves. We are subject, Mr Speaker, to a safety valve arrangement, so could I, through you, ask the Minister to meet with a delegation of providers and teachers in Stoke-on-Trent who are really hungry for a new way of delivering SEND provision in my city to make sure that those young children get the educations that they rightfully deserve?
Minister.
The Honourable Gentleman is absolutely right to identify the challenges and pressures that are on the budget, and obviously I've identified that we need to improve the school transport situation so that children can be educated locally. We need to provide more inclusive mainstream places, but indeed where special school places are required, we need to make sure they're in the right place and they are available for the children that need them. And I obviously would be happy to meet with the Honourable Gentleman to hear the ideas of his friends.
Lee Anderson.
Mr Speaker, number 13, please.
Thursday.
Mr Speaker, it was a Labour government that first enshrined freedom of expression in law, and to this day, Labour is committed to freedom of speech and academic freedom. That's why we're pressing ahead with a robust, rigorous and workable Freedom of Speech Act. We are taking common sense decisions in the national interest.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Unfortunately, there's a minority of teachers who subscribe to the sort of dog whistle, divisive politics sometimes seen from the opposition benches, and the benches down here, by the way. This has led to some children in Ashfield being put off from speaking, expressing their own opinions during sensible debate in school time. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that whilst in the classroom, teachers should remain politically neutral?
Mr Speaker, I've had the privilege of visiting hundreds of schools across our country, and I tell you, children are usually never backwards in coming forwards with their opinions in the schools that I visited, and I would hope that is the case in his constituency too. Of course, schools have a duty to promote issues such as fundamental British values, and schools are also subject to long-standing legal duties which do prohibit them from promoting partisan political views.
Laura Cox.
14, please, Mr Speaker.
Minister.
Mr Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to take 14 and questions 20 together. This government has a mission to break down barriers to opportunity. We want to rebalance opportunities towards young people who have the most to gain from apprenticeships, and where starts have fallen by almost 40%, we are introducing foundation apprenticeships to give more young people a foot in the door at the start of their working life.
Laura Kirk-Smith.
Mr Speaker, we're fortunate to have some great apprenticeship providers in Aylesbury like Bucks College Group and Bucks New University. When I joined pupils from the Grange School at their careers fair, I saw firsthand their excitement about the apprenticeship options on offer. We know that apprenticeships are win-win for young people and for sectors facing recruitment challenges like health and social care and construction. What steps is the Minister taking to expand and strengthen apprenticeships and to ensure that all young people who choose to go down that route are able to do so?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for her question. She is a real champion for students at Buckinghamshire College and indeed for young people across Aylesbury. I know the area represented by my honourable friend very well. After the Conservatives left us with a collapsing apprenticeship system as well as other skill shortages, Labour is listening to employers and redrawing the system through Skills England, a new growth and skills levy and a new foundation apprenticeships. This is how we unlock opportunity and drive growth.
In room.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Back in the autumn, the new government announced plans to reduce the financial support available for Level 7 apprenticeships. Does the Secretary of State understand that curtailing higher level apprenticeships make it harder to access graduate level skills and qualifications in rural areas like North Devon, where there are no universities nearby?
Minister.
This government has an extremely challenging fiscal inheritance. There are tough choices that need to be taken on how funding should be prioritised in order to generate opportunities for all. Employers will still be able to offer and invest in Level 7 apprenticeships where they feel they provide a good return on the investment. We are taking advice from Skills England, who engage with employers on funding for Level 7 apprenticeships over the autumn, and the Department expects to make a final decision on affected apprenticeships shortly.
Shadow Minister Neil O'Brien.
Mr. Speaker, the Government has said in answer to written questions that it has a forecast for the number of apprenticeships, but it won't publish it for members of this House to see, which is a shame. At the last oral questions, the Secretary of State said it was still the Government's policy to allow employers to spend 50% of their apprenticeship levy money on other things. Isn't the reason that the Government won't publish its forecast for the number of apprenticeships because their own policy will lead to a sharp reduction in the number of people starting apprenticeships?
No. Minister.
We are very confident with what this government is doing with apprenticeships. Our levy-funded growth and skills offer with apprenticeships at the heart will deliver greater flexibility for learners and employees in England, aligned with our industrial strategy, creating routes into good, skilled jobs in growing industries. As a first step, this will include shorter duration and foundation apprenticeships in targeted sectors.
Marcia Dakota.
15, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you. High quality teaching.
The Minister, is he due to come in on this or not? No. OK, carry on.
High quality teaching is the most important in-school factor for improving outcomes for all children, including those with disabilities. That's why we're committed to delivering our first step of recruiting 6,500 new teachers to drive up high and rising standards in our schools, both in mainstream and in specialist settings. And we're doing that by bolstering paying conditions and restoring teaching as a respected expert profession.
Marcia Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Research in June 2023 found that only 56% of teachers in mainstream schools felt confident about supporting children with a special education need or disability. Today, that means that many children are still missing out on learning and leaving school without the skills that they need, including in my constituency of Battersea. So does the Minister agree with me that we need more specialist teachers, including those for multisensory purposes and teachers for children with visual impairments, to ensure that every child has the opportunity to fulfil their potential?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady for that question. All teachers are teachers of special educational needs and disabilities. High quality teaching is absolutely central to ensuring pupils with SEND are given the best possible opportunities to achieve in their education. And to support all teachers, we are implementing high quality teacher training reforms, which begins with initial teacher training, continues through early career training to middle and senior leadership. And these changes and reforms will ensure that teachers have the skills to support all pupils to succeed, including those with SEND.
Good job.
Thank you. On Friday, I had the opportunity to visit Manor Special School, where 60 members of staff look after the 92 pupils there, many of whom have the most severe learning disabilities and autism. I was absolutely blown away by the staff care there, and particularly I was particularly grateful to be shown round by Lucia, who was an adorable one of the pupils there. Will the Minister join with me in thanking all of our special school teachers for the amazing commitment that they show? And on Manamead's behalf, can I invite the Minister to visit and see that work firsthand?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his question and for celebrating the work that the teachers, particularly in our special schools, but also teachers throughout our school system, the work that they do tirelessly day in, day out to support pupils to succeed, but particularly those with special educational needs and disabilities. I'll certainly take away his very kind invitation.
Richard Holden.
Question number 16, please, Mr. Speaker.
As a government, we've had to take tough decisions to get public finances back on track. In 2025-26, the entitlements budget will be over £8 billion, with a further £75 million to support the sector in this pivotal expansion year. We've also announced the largest ever uplift to the early years pupil premium. Early years is central to our mission to give every child the best start in life.
Richard Oldham.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Now, early year providers are being absolutely hammered, with many of them seeing their costs per member of staff almost doubling in terms of national insurance. Many of these are small businesses in the private sector, and also actually some of them are schools providing it for young people in those before they come into reception classes. They are all worried, whether it's primary schools in the state sector or small private providers, about the extra costs being imposed on them. So can the Minister assure my constituents and people up and down the country that families will not be seeing higher costs of early years provision, that those childcare places will still be there, and will the Minister assure this House that at the end of this Parliament there will be more childcare places than at the start of it?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, unlike the party opposite, we are on the side of working parents, and education, high quality education, will be available for every child. And Mr. Speaker, on the substantive point, it would help if the party opposite were honest. This party opposite wouldn't reverse their eyes.
And the Minister, Neil O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The decision not to compensate nurseries for the national insurance increase has pushed providers to the brink, according to the Early Years Alliance. And many in schools are worried that they'll be next, including schools with nurseries. Now, local councils had a bill of £1.8 billion for the national insurance increase, but they got compensation of less than a third of that because the indirect costs were not covered. So can the Minister assure the House that when it comes to schools, compensation for the national insurance increase will cover all of the costs to schools, not just the direct costs?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Government announced that public sector employers will receive compensation for the increase in their NICS contributions, including school-based nurseries and maintained nursery schools. But in line with other areas, there will be no additional NICS funding beyond this.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Children growing up in our country deserve the best start in life, nothing less. Through our plan for change, Labour will get a record share of children school-ready. We'll make it a reality through opening new school-based nurseries, rolling out childcare, earlier intervention, speech and language support, help for families with SEND and wider SEND reform. It's rightly ambitious. We are determined to deliver it.
Just silence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a Jewish person, can I just take this opportunity to thank you for everything that you've done to help this House remember my ancestors and those ancestors of other Jewish people who we remember today. Abram Bringate School in my constituency in Bamfalong had some welcome funding announced through the last free school funding round, but they've just been told that that funding has been paused, possibly until 2028. This is a really important school because it provides support for kids to stay in mainstream education even when they've left it. So can I ask the Secretary of State when my constituents can expect a decision to be made on the funding for this school?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend. He is right to raise the question on behalf of his constituents, and I'd be more than happy to meet with him to discuss it further. We are working rapidly, Mr. Speaker, through the whole Free Schools pipeline to ensure that we are creating the places where they are required, including specialist provision, and making sure that there is a strong case and good value for the taxpayer.
Come to topicals, Mike Tapp.
One, please, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, today marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau. As the years slip away, our duty to remember only strengthens. I've had the privilege in recent months of listening to the powerful and deeply moving testimony of Holocaust survivors in person, including Rini Salt and Marla Tribic. It is vital that the world hears their voices, hears what happened to them and their families, what happened to 6 million Jewish men, women and children during the Holocaust. Especially important given the shocking rise in anti-Semitic abuse we have seen since the 7th of October. This government could not feel more strongly about this, Mr. Speaker, and that's why we have confirmed that the Holocaust will be a compulsory topic in all schools following the completion of our curriculum and assessment review.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've recently launched an exciting new reading initiative across Dover and Deal called Tap Into Reading, where we tour the schools and they read theatrically from a VE Day text. That will end in May at a theatre. Will the Education Secretary join the judging panel in May?
Mr. Speaker, I think the brilliant initiative shows what a champion my honourable friend is for his constituents. I'll consider seriously his request. I'd certainly be happy to visit his constituency soon and to work with him, perhaps also on how his local schools might be able to join the UK-Ukraine School Partnership, which is based around the power of reading.
Secretary of State Laura Trott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with the Right Honourable Lady's words on Holocaust Memorial Day? Mr. Speaker, just today we had another voice come out against the disastrous academy proposals in the government's bill. The Children's Commissioner, in a scathing letter, said that ending the academy order to turn around failing schools will mean, and I quote, that children will spend longer in failing schools. Her own backbenchers have said that ending the academy order would be a huge mistake and will weaken standards. Instead of running all her policy past unions who are more interested in their own power than teachers' pay, will the Education Secretary listen to the Children's Commissioner, her own backbenchers and head teachers up and down the country?
Order. No, don't look at me like that. This is topicals. If you want to get these long questions in, please do them in the substantive question. It's got to be speedy. Punchy questions, sharp answers. You've got to help me. Secretary of State, please.
Mr. Speaker, it was the Labour government that created the academies movement, and a Labour government will ensure that they continue to flourish. But the party opposite left 1,000 failing schools, which continue to let down more than 400,000 children year after year. We will intervene more rapidly and more effectively to turn it around. The party opposite have nothing to say on school standards, more interested in their own record than best outcomes for children.
Laura Trott.
The Education Secretary does not understand that her bill is going to make things worse, not better. This legislation is in total chaos, Mr. Speaker. At the dispatch box, the Education Secretary said that pay will not be capped by this legislation, but yet we know now that it will be, and they can't even do a U-turn right. Last week, the Prime Minister told the Leader of the Opposition to read the pay amendment, but they haven't even laid it. 5 days later, can the Education Secretary tell me when is it going to come?
Mr. Speaker, there was an awful lot in that, but very little about how we deliver higher standards for our children, and this is what the bill is all about. The only people in hock to vested interests are the party opposite, more interested in defending school uniform racketeers and the private schools lobby than investing in our state schools.
Tony Antonia, sir.
Mr. Speaker, widely accessible violent pornography is fuelling a culture of extreme misogyny, the normalisation of sexual violence, and is warping the perceptions and attitudes of both young boys and girls to sex and healthy relationships. What steps is her department taking to encourage schools to be proactive in combating the influence of online pornography and the harms experienced by young people as a result of it?
I strongly agree with my honourable friend's concerns, and I'm determined to tackle this and the scourge of misogyny. She brings experience to this place.
Sorry about this, Secretary. Please, you've got to sit down. You can't just remain standing up when the questions are coming back on. Do we all understand? Great. Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend brings real expertise to this matter from education. We are reviewing the relationship, sex and health education guidance to make sure that schools are able to teach what children need to know in the modern world. And of course, our school staff have a crucial role to play in tackling this issue as well.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Munira Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week's National Audit Office report found £13.8 billion worth of maintenance backlogs in our schools, with thousands of students taking A-levels and GCSEs studying in schools with the crumbling concrete rack, and the Joint Asbestos Union committee warning that pupils and teachers face a tsunami of deaths after being exposed to asbestos in the school estate. What urgent steps are ministers taking to ensure that our children and school staff can focus on teaching and learning and not worrying about whether they're safe?
The Honourable Lady is absolutely right. Far too often our staff have had to focus on maintenance and buildings rather than driving up standards in our schools. The party opposite talk about their record. Their record was children cowering under steel props because of the rat crisis that they left behind.
Andrew Cooper.
This morning I visited Cledford Primary School in Middlewich to speak in their school assembly. On my visit, the head teacher proudly showed me the school-based nursery that staff went above and beyond to get ready for the start of this term. Will the Minister join me in congratulating Cledford in getting this up and running, and can he outline the role school-based nurseries will play in helping children achieve their early learning goals?
Minister.
High-quality childcare and early education is a crucial opportunity to transform life chances. Too often is unavailable and unaffordable. That is why this Labour government is committed to delivering additional places in new and expanded school-based nurseries. I congratulate my honourable friends' school for the work that they're doing. All plans will benefit children and parents with high-quality and accessible provision.
Keller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government's decision to make schools foot the bill for the Teachers' Pay Award is pushing many schools close to the brink. As the head of Richard Challoner's school in my constituency told me, his and many other schools are being forced to consider severe cuts to balance their budget. So, Mr. Speaker, will the Secretary of State tell us what support she will give schools in these very difficult circumstances?
Mr. Speaker, I do recognise the challenging context that many schools experience after 14 years of the party opposite. At the last budget, notwithstanding the very severe challenges we face, the Chancellor prioritised key education areas, including making sure that we were able to deliver on that 5.5% pay award for teachers that the last government refused to back.
Next, Boris Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I refer to my register of interests. As a school governor, I recognise the importance of strong safeguarding measures to protect our children. So can the Secretary of State reassure me that rather than play politics on this issue or pander to extremes, this government will remain laser-focused on improving safeguarding in our schools?
Minister.
Protecting children is a cross-government priority, and although the devolved nations have their own safeguarding systems, we will continue to work closely with them to ensure that safeguarding remains a priority and that we all engage with our schools to see where we need to strengthen our safeguarding support.
Morgan.
Mr. Speaker, a severe shortage of specialist provision and a council in dire financial straits is leaving children with severe levels of need in my constituency making 4-hour round trips to school to get to school and back every day, and it's too much for many of them to cope with. Can the Secretary of State outline what steps she's taking and working with local government to reduce these journey times for children who simply can't cope with them?
The Honourable Lady raises a really important point. No child should struggle to get to school because of a lack of transport, but also no child should have to travel great distances if there can be a place in their local mainstream school that is inclusive and appropriate, and that is what we are determined to deliver for all children, to relieve both, make sure they get the best opportunities, but also for their families too.
Mark Siebert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Springfield Training in Leeds South West and Morley provide excellent opportunities to young people not in work, training or education to do fulfilling apprenticeships. I've seen it in action myself. What is the department doing to support organisations like Springfield Training to get young people into work?
Independent training providers are an important part of the post-16 education landscape, funded to deliver the training employers and learners need. This supports our plan for a youth guarantee to ensure every young person can earn and learn. Springfield Training contribute to this effort, governed by our contractual relationship with commercial providers.
We know that early diagnosis is critical to effective SEND provision, but there's a national crisis in the provision and availability of educational psychologists. Given that Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission are jointly investigating in my constituency Cambridgeshire's SEND services, would the Minister meet with me and with the Council on the outcome and the actions?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Member for raising those questions. I was very happy to meet with her to understand the issues in more detail.
Chris Vins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Students at Sir Frederick Gibbard College in Harlow have been taught in marquees and porter cabins for over a year after the previous government wasted £29 million on a building which was since deemed unsafe. Can I ask what consideration her department will give to support SFG College moving forward?
Minister.
I would like to thank pupils, teachers and school leaders for their resilience since the original buildings were closed in August 2025. We have delivered high-quality temporary modular accommodation, which the school will use until its new permanent buildings are ready, and we will continue to work closely with the Trust and the local community to find a permanent solution.
Andrew Snow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. When I worked at the University of Salford, I was proud to be part of the revolution that happened in higher degree apprenticeships that saw thousands of people finding new technical careers following higher education. But with unemployment rising, with recruitment agencies reporting reductions on a significant scale of the number of job postings as companies squeeze their payroll following the government's NI increases, what new measures is the government taking to protect apprenticeship levels in this economic climate?
After Conservatives left us with a collapsing apprenticeship system, as well as skill shortages, Labour is listening to employers and redrawing the system through Skills England, a new growth and skills levy and a new foundations apprenticeship.
Sanders.
Speaker, to insulate our homes, need to build the 1.5 million we need. We will need far more construction workers in this country, about 1 million over the next decade. Can the Minister set out what steps we are taking with apprenticeships and training to ensure we have the construction workers we need?
We are working across government with the sector to put in place training schemes to build up the next generation of installers. This includes developing new apprenticeships for retrofit coordinators and installation technicians. We have also established, as I've already mentioned, Skills England, who will form a coherent national picture of where skill gaps exist and how this can be addressed.
Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited a school in my constituency in a building that's hundreds of years old. The school conditions allocation doesn't cover the work needed to keep it warm and safe and up to date. So I wondered what steps the government's taking to ensure that older buildings are fitted out for classroom purposes too.
Minister.
Ensuring schools and colleges have the resources and buildings that they need is a key part of our mission to break down barriers to opportunity. I'm very happy to meet the Honourable Member to hear his concerns further.
Billington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Milne Children's Centre in my constituency helps people, young people achieve their early learning goals, provides safeguarding services, and has been doing so with many other deprived families for many years. And yet, despite the fact that Kent County Council has been given £4 million in order to be able to protect the family hubs, they are not protecting these services. Can the Minister explain to Kent County Council that this vital service is something they should be finding the money for?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for raising her concerns so passionately. We are aware that Kent County Council are taking the necessary steps to best meet the needs of families and will continue to provide family hub services from existing alternative sites nearby. With that said, I'd be happy to meet with her to discuss this further.
Clive Jones.
Wokingham Borough Council often struggles to find schools, including specialist schools, that can meet the needs of SEND pupils. As a result, many children are receiving education other than at school or reliant on alternative provision. Even with this, there are often instances where some needs identified in the ECHP are not met. Will the Minister...
sorry, it's meant to be a topical. Somebody have a quick go at answering.
The Department for Education's regional team engages with Wokingham on a regular basis to discuss their SEND provision. They provide constructive challenge, they share best practice and they provide support. And this has included providing a DFE SEND advisor to work with Wokingham and support the local authority to improve its services.
Deirdre Costigan, are you good at...
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently visited Beaconsfield Primary School in Ealing Southall, where teachers told me they have to fill in up to 6 forms to get disabled children the help they need. This is time they don't have, and they often need to choose which child to prioritise for support. How will the Minister reduce unnecessary paperwork and make it easier and more efficient for schools to ensure every disabled child gets the educational support they need?
Mr. Speaker, yet again we hear the urgent need to reform our SEND system. We are determined to turn it around. We will work with everyone across this House, anyone with an interest in this area, including parents, teachers and staff, because we need to get this right.
Louis French.
Mr. Speaker, for safeguarding purposes, a number of primary schools in my constituency now allow pupils to wear their PE kit all day on PE days rather than get them changed in school. What assurances and what support will ministers be giving those schools that are concerned about the changes to the uniform policy that Labour are pushing through, particularly participation in PE?
Mr. Speaker, there is no reason that schools should need to make any kind of change. And of course, head teachers make decisions on a practical basis as to how they feel they should run their schools. What we are doing, however, Mr. Speaker, is cutting the cost to parents, putting more money back in their pockets, unlike the party opposite, who seem to oppose practical, straightforward measures to cut the cost of school uniform.
Maskell.
Mr. Speaker, ensuring sensory and motor integration is crucial for a child's development and learning, yet many of these services are only available in the private sector. So will the Minister meet with me to discuss how we ensure that parents can access these crucial services?
Minister.
I know the Honourable Lady is a strong advocate for children with special educational needs and disabilities in her constituency, and I'd be happy to meet with her to discuss this specific issue.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Children's Commissioner says the government is legislating against the things we know work in schools. Catherine Birbal-Singh says the schools bill is, quote, catastrophic. Sir Dan Moynihan asks, why are we doing this? So why does the Education Secretary think she knows more about education than the Children's Commissioner, the head of the best school in the country and the head of the best multi-academy trust?
Mr. Speaker, this Labour government is determined to deliver high and rising standards for all of our children. The party opposite left 1,000 failing schools, continuing to let down more than 400,000 children. 1 in 3 children leaving without a firm foundation at primary school in English and maths. 1 in 5 children regularly out of school. If they want to debate their record, I'll do it any day.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister meet with me? Will the Minister meet with me to discuss the SEND crisis in Suffolk Coastal? For context, I've had over 100 families reach out to me since the general election to talk about their urgent needs and the crisis they're facing because of Suffolk County Council.
Minister.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Devon, only 4.9% of EHCPs are received within 20 weeks. Conservative-run Devon County Council has been utterly failing our children for the past 10 years. Will the Minister meet with me to discuss what more we can do to support Devon County Council and turn things around so that families like my constituent James are not waiting 2.5 years for the test he needs to get an EHCP?
We know that local authorities have been significantly impacted by the increased demand for EHCPs and workforce capacity issues. We know they need a more effective and efficient service delivery for schools and families, and we're working as hard as we can to support local authorities to meet their requirements in the timely way.
That completes the questions. The front bench changeover.